Thanks so much, Emily, and thanks to our team for bringing these access events and this programming to you. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all virtually, at least, and welcome. We're here today focused on the issue of improving safety and security in downtown Seattle, and a report on some of the progress that's been made and the work ahead. And as an organization, we see this as absolutely fundamental to our continued recovery and renewal and reimagination of downtown Seattle, so that it's a safe place for everybody who lives, works, shops, visits, and plays here. Everybody deserves to be safe and feel safe when they are out and about in downtown Seattle, getting off a bus, a train, in a park, or other public areas. This was certainly a challenge prior to the pandemic, and the pandemic in many ways exacerbated the safety and security objectives and goals in downtown. But we're here today to talk about the progress and efforts currently underway with some new leaders and some of our existing leaders as well, and the collaboration and partnership that they've formed to address safety in downtown. We know that cities have never worked well if they weren't first safe and healthy and welcoming to everybody. We've got to get that right if we are going to continue to welcome back residents, visitors, and workers to downtown Seattle and make it a safe and delightful place to run a business or an arts and cultural organization. Here today to moderate our panel and introduce our panelists is our good friend, historian, producer, and all around just great guy, Feliks Banel, who was producing a great program last night atop the Space Needle, celebrating and honoring the 60th anniversary of our World's Fair here in Seattle. So he pulled the night shift and is here for the morning shift. It was a great program, and if you didn't catch it live on the Seattle channel, it's I believe up on their website now. And so take a look at that. Feliks did a great job of just honoring the history, but also challenging everybody to sort of look forward and digest what that World's Fair means for us today as we look ahead to some of the challenges and opportunities in our city. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Feliks. And just one last comment, just welcome a number of our colleagues that are joining us from downtown LA, Long Beach, and Portland. I think they're on the line, and we're all looking to learn from each other as we tackle these issues in our own community. So over to you, Feliks, and thanks again for your partnership on this series.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks, John. Thanks for being there last night, and thanks everybody for joining us this morning. It's always great to do these DSA programs. We're going to be talking about public safety downtown. Of course, it's a popular topic. There's lots to say. We could spend hours and hours talking about it, but we're going to spend the next hour focusing on the things we can get to. I want to thank our panelists, introduce them, and then we'll get to your questions and my questions. First of all, Leesa Manion is Chief of Staff for the King County Prosecutor's Office. She has more than 2 decades of experience with local criminal justice system. She began working at the King County Prosecutor's Office in 1996 as a deputy prosecuting attorney. In her role as Chief of Staff, Leesa is focused on criminal justice policy directives and strategies aimed at reducing racial disproportionality, protecting public safety, increasing victim services, and reducing recidivism. Natalie Walton-Anderson is Criminal Chief of Seattle City Attorney's Office. She leads the City Attorney's Office Criminal Division, having been appointed by Seattle City Attorney Ann Davison in December. Previously, she spent more than 2 decades at the King County Prosecutor's Office and most recently served as an assistant U.S. attorney. She's been deeply involved in the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, or LEAD program, and her legal career began at age 18 volunteering for King County Kids Court. All right. As Emily mentioned, we do monitor the chat box, and please feel free to ask questions at any time during the program. That helps us guide the conversation to know what you're most curious about. So please do participate that way. We always begin each conversation with some data points, and here are a few to get us started. Now, as noted in DSA's 2022 State of Downtown Economic Report, which you can find at downtownseattle.org, and these are Seattle Police Department figures, violent crime in downtown has gone up 18% in the past year. Property crime is up 35% in downtown since 2020. And according to the SPD website, the West Precinct, which includes downtown, has had 411 violent crimes so far in 2022 and more than 2,800 property crimes. Now, it's not all bad news. The good news is that we're on track for both of those categories, violent crimes and property crimes, to be lower in 2022 than in 2021. So it's definitely a time of flux. Lots of factors factor into that, of course, the pandemic being a major one, but also other long-standing problems that have been sort of almost intractable at times. There's lots of phrases, lots of things, buzzwords you hear nowadays around like the High Utilizer Initiative or Operation New Day, that sorts of thing. I thought we'd start off by just getting an update. And first of all, explaining what it is to someone who might not know what Operation New Day is, how it's going so far, and what might be ahead in the immediate future. Who wants to take a crack at that question?
I can go ahead and start, Felix. Oh, my camera.
There you are.
There we go. Okay. So for individuals who aren't familiar, Operation New Day was a focused and coordinated and consolidated effort that involved the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, the Seattle City Attorney's Office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, our federal prosecutors, the Mayor's Office, Seattle Police Department, and our federal law enforcement agencies and partners. And it was really a focused effort to get rid of the open air drug market that occurred at 12th and Jackson. And as a result of the investigation efforts that took place with our law enforcement friends, there were cases that were filed by the U.S. Attorney's Office, King County Prosecutor's Office, and the Seattle City Attorney's Office. And that area looks vastly improved. And the Seattle Police Department has done a really good job of maintaining a presence there. And the area still looks good. And I think the thing that we can learn from that is the power of what happens when we all work together. And we can learn from that and also apply that same type of focus coordination in other parts of downtown and our other parts of our city.
So the cooperation, is there some secret sauce that's made that cooperation possible that where it wasn't possible before? Or what is it about 2022 that's different from 2021 or 2010 for that matter?
Well, we have new leadership in the mayor's office. We have new leadership in the Seattle City Attorney's Office. And from where I sit in the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, the coordination between our office and the Seattle City Attorney's Office has never been stronger. I really am very grateful for Ann Davison's leadership. I'm really grateful for Natalie's leadership, and they're willing to share information between offices because it allows us to work in a coordinated fashion and to be more effective. And we didn't have that relationship necessarily in the past. So I'm really thankful to have it here.
And at 12th and Jackson, is what's happened there, was that sort of a one-time sweep that will then have to be done at some point again in the future? Or is this sort of, is the root being addressed, or is it just the surface? Tell me, what's the strategy behind what was done?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think most people on the call will agree we have to do a two-pronged approach. Definitely addressing the incidence of crime, definitely filing charges against those who are dealing fentanyl and meth and other harmful substances. And for the individuals who are living in the surrounding area who are committing repeat nonviolent acts at a symptom of mental health disorder or substance use disorder, we have to get to the root cause of that behavior. We want the behavior to stop, but accountability can look different. So I would say it's twofold: address incidents of crime and also get to the root cause.
And Natalie Walton-Anderson from the City Attorney's Office, what's your perspective on Operation New Day?
Again, I agree with a lot of Leesa's comments in terms of the collaboration between multiple agencies. I also think that the focus on communication and collaboration reflects our new leadership, including the mayor's office, wanting to bring all of our criminal justice partners together. And also working with SPD. We all have to look at our resources and figure out what we're doing resource-wise. But we were listening to our community at 12th and Jackson, who were crying out for our city leaders and also law enforcement, our community partners, to take action there. And I think that's what you saw in terms of the result. Operation New Day is ongoing. Our office is still, getting reports with regard to Operation New Day. It's an ongoing effort. It's going to take all of us involved to continue to put forth the effort, the collaboration, and the resources to make sure that that area and other areas similarly in downtown continue to have not just the presence of law enforcement, but community partners that can help with the underlying issues. And that's just an ongoing effort that we all need to be involved in.
And that project and what you two have both described, it's indicative of what's essentially like a complex ecosystem of different agencies and different jurisdictions who all have some role in addressing public safety. Is there a sort of an easy way to explain that for someone who's an outsider or may not pay close enough attention to know the difference between the city attorney and the King County prosecutor's office? Does someone want to take that sort of kind of set the stage for what that ecosystem looks like and what that cooperation, what it really means when those different agencies and jurisdictions are working together?
Sure, I can take that.
Oh, go ahead. Go, Natalie. No, go.
Well, I'll start with the Seattle City Attorney's Office. The Seattle City Attorney's Office, our jurisdiction is the city of Seattle and misdemeanors that occur in that city. On average, we get between 12,000 and 15,000 cases that are referred to us by the Seattle Police Department. That represents about 75 to 80% of the crime in the city. And so those are the cases that we handle from a jurisdictional perspective. Whether or not it's a misdemeanor depends on the level of crime. And so that's what determines which office it goes to. I won't speak for King County, I'll let Leesa do that, but I do have experience there. You know, our felony cases that happen in the city of Seattle go to the King County Prosecutor's Office. And Leesa, if you want to continue.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. So the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office has felony jurisdiction in all parts of King County. We also have juvenile jurisdiction in all parts of King County. And we only have misdemeanor jurisdiction in the areas that are unincorporated. So for example, some parts of White Center. We also handle DUI cases that take place on I-5 within King County.
And Monisha Harrell, does Operation New Day, does it fit into some bigger strategy for the Harrell administration here in 2022, addressing public safety in downtown Seattle?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I actually bristle a little bit at just the title Operation New Day. I know that we like these sorts of kind of catchy things to wrap things up, but the reality of it is that we are changing the way in which we are doing policing and pursuing some public safety strategies. This isn't something, when you say Operation New Day, it gives the impression that there is a beginning and an end to it. We are fundamentally changing the way in which we approach public safety. And so there's not going to be a definitive end. Like now we have stopped doing this sort of patrolling, or now we have stopped doing this sort of policing. We have to really pay attention to what is sustainable. And that's what we've been trying to do, is make these incremental changes on what can be sustainable and then roll out additional projects and programs as we know that they can remain sustainable and as we grow our resources.
I have one question from the audience. Is it true that most of the multiple offenders who were arrested at 12th and Jackson are back on the street?
There are a number who were, you know, booked and released. And so, you know, that's part of the larger justice system. We don't have any, once we make the case, make the arrests, book them in, you know, it goes off to the next hand within our you know, public safety system. And so we do know that there have been a number of folks who have, you know, been booked and released. And, you know, I think that DSA is doing a pretty good job of highlighting all of the partners that are part of that system and the roles that each of us play.
All right. And how about, let's switch to an intersection that's near and dear to pretty much everyone's heart, about 3rd and Pike, the 3rd Avenue area of downtown Seattle. What's going on down there in terms of public safety and the cooperation we're talking about in the different jurisdictions trying to address those long-standing issues that have been exacerbated during the pandemic?
Yeah, you know, similar to, so if you look at 12th and Jackson, that was a little bit of a pilot for the work that we could do together. Working with our other law enforcement partners, you know, clearly you've identified a few of our key partners here, and working with them to say, okay, can we take this type of working together and replicate it across other areas? And so 12th and Jackson, you saw kind of a pilot for that. On 3rd, you're seeing us continue that work and roll it out a little bit more strong with a more sustained period there. But we're still, you know, working on holding the gains that we've made at 12th and Jackson. And so this is what I'm talking about in terms of sustainability. We have to be able to build a solid foundation, get an area back on track, and then expand to what else can we do. We're not looking to let up on anything. We're not looking to let go of 12th and Jackson. We're not looking to let go of 3rd Avenue as we expand what we are able to do across the city. So that's why I have a little bit of like, this isn't a one-time thing. Everything that we're trying to build as sustainably as possible so that we are not creating a yo-yo effect for public safety in our communities.
I mean, is there a definition of sustainable for 3rd Avenue specifically? What sustainability looks like there in terms of this approach?
Well, I mean, 3rd Avenue is part of the core of our city. It has to be safe for people to work, play, and recreate, right? We need this area as a strong core for tourism. We need to ensure that this part of our economic engine works well. So, I've talked with a couple of members of the DSA around what does the long-term future of 3rd Avenue look like? And it's not just going to be a public safety solution in terms of just law enforcement. It has also got to be built environment. It has also got to be reactivating businesses, both our service-based businesses as well as our retail-based businesses. And so more eyes on the street, more people on the street also means less of a need for traditional law enforcement, police and others, because we'll have that traffic, that positive traffic that will influence the area.
A question from the audience about collaboration, and it's from David Della about the great collaborative approach on Operation New Day. But beyond the government cooperating, probably most of the people in the audience today are probably not part of the government. They're either business owners or people who live or work in downtown. Is there something that the community can do, either at the individual level or the community organization level, to support this kind of collaboration and address these kinds of issues, on as broad a scale as possible? And that could be any three of you. Any three of you could chime in on that. Just like from the prosecutor's office or city attorney's office, I'd like to hear what you guys say about that as well.
I'll start and then I'll pass it off. There are a lot of things that the public can do. I think that there's been a sense of apathy in the past that has set in, and so people have stopped reporting as they see things. And we really need the community to return to the vigilance of reporting. We don't know what doesn't get reported, and we follow the data and we follow the statistics. So the more that people report, the more that we are able to be responsive to what is going on. I would say the other thing is, again, what I was saying, positive activity on the street, getting people back downtown, whether or not those are workers or restaurants and service related businesses, retail related businesses, getting people back downtown and putting positive energy. When there is no positive energy in that area, then folks who need a place to just exist and be will take up that space. So it's really incumbent upon us to work with the public in many of these regards. And then I'll say the last thing is, there used to be some organizations like the Muni League and others that used to do a review of judicial races and races beyond just like the big flashy ones like, Mayor and City Council and others. There is an entire elected system around public safety. And I really think people need to pay attention to judges again. People need to pay attention to every single aspect of that. And I think that there were a lot of fantastic citizen volunteer run groups that actually did a lot of that work. Some of those organizations don't exist anymore, don't do that sort of review of the entire public safety system, but it would be fantastic for the public to re-engage with that sort of outreach and engagement.
Leesa?
I agree with everything that Monisha has shared, and I also appreciate the way that she has framed this collaboration, that it's an ongoing new way of doing business. And when Monisha talks about reporting, I have to say, from where I stand, that's a two-way street. And we in the prosecuting attorney's office have really changed how we do business in terms of reporting back what we're doing with cases. And so when we file cases from either 12th and Jackson or 3rd and Pine, I have been a lot more vigilant, and my comms team has been a lot more vigilant about sharing that with John and with Rachel Smith at the chamber, so that they can share that information with their members. As felony prosecutors, we file on average 30 felony cases every single day. Every single, gun crime that has been referred to us coming out of the downtown core, we have filed those referrals within 72 hours. But if individuals don't know that, if our community doesn't know that, they don't have a sense of like, oh, folks are working together. It puts some scale on the amount of fear that they're feeling and allows some fears to be, put to rest because someone's in custody. And I have to say, law enforcement, despite their staffing shortages, have been great partners and have been working really hard to get those cases to us. So I think that's just a fundamental change in how we're doing business. And it goes to that heart of partnership. It goes to that heart of sustainability. And it goes to the heart of reporting and making that a two-way street.
Natalie?
If I could just kind of add to the conversation going, I think that the call for the community, especially from, I think, the Seattle City Attorney's Office, is that we need the participation of our witnesses and our victims in prosecuting these misdemeanor offenses. And I could not agree with Senior Deputy Mayor Harrell more in terms of asking the public to participate in so much of the process. Our input from our victims, our crime survivors, and our witnesses about what they want to see done, whether it is prosecution, whether it is diversion, whether it is a treatment alternative, is really important information. But also, we cannot pursue these cases without their involvement. And it is one key thing that is difficult, I think, that the Seattle City Attorney's Office and probably the King County Prosecutor's Office faces as well. People have indicated that, they don't want to participate in the process, either because of, what have been the conditions downtown, or just, the fear of participating in. And we really need that participation in order for us to really look at these cases and prosecute them. So that's the way that we would ask community to get involved.
There's a mechanical question, or a question about the mechanics from one of the audience members. This is Lindsay Pearsall. It's nearly impossible to report things. The phones only ring and the online tools won't accept all reports. Is there a plan to improve the ease of reporting?
Absolutely. It is one of the most critical things we can do. So there's an intersection and an intertwining around public safety and homelessness. And so especially as I think you've seen reports that a lot of the increases in public safety calls have come in and around some of the encampments. And so our approach has been to first better understand from a data perspective where all of the homeless encampments are, how the calls we're getting for 911, where they map as pertains to those encampments, and other such things like that. And so I think the mayor mentioned, I don't think I'm blowing anything by saying the mayor mentioned that we would be sharing that work with the city in about a month. We have created a database, in just the few short months that we've been here, we've created a database that allows us to see in real time when people report encampments or other obstructions, that we have a database that in real time will tell all of our city departments where those are and what's going on, the counts for those areas. And so we'll be able to show that, debut that to the public. We built it and we've been testing it, and it's almost ready for the public. But we've been doing that as a way to coordinate, not just with our partners externally, but to coordinate internally. We have 32 different departments in the city of Seattle, or 34 different departments in the city of Seattle, many of whom touch public safety and homelessness and other challenges. And so breaking down the silos between all of those departments has been really, really critical. in making sure that we have a holistic plan and that we're utilizing our resources to the best of our abilities, as opposed to every department having a little piece and not knowing what the other departments are doing.
Talk a little bit about the case backlog and sort of timing in general. I mean, these very complex issues with multiple factors leading to their creation. I mean, they didn't happen overnight. I think someone used the metaphor of flipping a switch. This didn't happen just in the pandemic. Some of these issues were here long before that. From the mayor's office perspective, from prosecutor's office and city attorney's office, and for people who want to come back to work in downtown Seattle or are already working in downtown Seattle or live there, how long is this going to take to really address all this stuff? I mean, and let's get into the notion of the backlog of cases that the city attorney's office is addressing in the last couple of weeks. What's the time horizon for this? What's a realistic time horizon for people who just, want to know when it's going to be noticeably different downtown when they're walking through there or driving through there or, stepping outside where they live or where they work?
Sure. Well, as you said, we didn't get here overnight, and COVID did exacerbate quite a bit of the problems that we already had existing and the challenges. As the Seattle City Attorney's Office announced earlier this week, the new leadership had inherited a backlog of approximately 5,000 misdemeanor cases. And we've had to make the tough decision because with Anne's new plan of basically reviewing cases close in time within 5 business days. And we've been very close to meeting that goal almost in every case that has come in since February. But because of that, this look backwards at 5,000 cases, we had to prioritize in order to keep current with what's happening. And so we had to make some tough choices in terms of what we were going to have to do. And so we are going to have to decline a significant number of cases, about half of those cases. But moving forward, which is the goal, is to move forward here. The goal will be to stay on top of that, to make sure that we have our own data points and we have expectations for how those cases will be reviewed and in what time frame we will review them. And so again, in terms of estimating when things will be different, in terms of the Seattle City Attorney's Office, things are different right now. In terms of the time frame that we review cases and the time frame that we act on cases that are current. But it is going to take time for our entire city to address many of the challenges that are there.
Leesa?
I agree with everything that everyone has said about we didn't get here overnight. I mean, we in the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, I feel like we are doing a good job of staying current on current felonies. We do have a bit of a backlog. But we also have a challenge just in the number of filed cases that are awaiting trial. Right now, we have over 250 homicide cases that have been filed awaiting trial. And during the pandemic, during a big chunk of the pandemic, there were no in-person jury trials. And even when those resumed, they resumed at a much slower rate. So as we are all returning to work and things are coming back to regular normal capacity, those cases will be our priority, and we'll be working with our judges and with our public defenders to get those through the system.
Monisha, or Deputy Mayor? When we'll be able to look? When will we be able to go downtown, look around, or read the news, listen to the radio, or watch TV, and not see reports about crime in downtown Seattle or those sorts of things?
That's a tough one because I want to be realistic that we're still a major city. And so as a major city, we're always going to have some, there's always going to be some activity. However, I think it's important for people to feel safe. And there are a lot of different steps that go into that. I think I saw a comment from Sabrina about the DSA 3rd Avenue Vision Plan. And that's got to be an element of it, right? We do have to address issues of a healthier built environment, one that encourages what I'll say is less negative energy in the area and more positive energy in the area. That may include things like expanding our law enforcement presence, but that can't be the only element. We have to have other elements. We do know that there's always the question of how we at a point in time in the past, centralized services for folks who needed a hand. We centralized those services downtown, and how that's not helpful in order to be able to say, hey, you know, if you're taking folks who could have some challenges and you are concentrating them in an area, you have to expect that there is going to be some impacts from that concentration. And so we have to do a much better job of paying attention to our mix of businesses, our mix of services, our built environment, all of those things, in addition to public safety, that is law enforcement and prosecutions and those sorts of things. They have to be a part of the equation in order for us to have a city that feels safe for everybody.
And so what's the timing of that? I mean, if you really had to get down to like setting a date, you know, when we can look forward to seeing major changes or feeling major, so much of this is about feeling major changes and attitudes and impressions. When will we be able to point to and say, hey, look, all this collaboration, all this great work between these different agencies, the city and the county, the mayor's office, the city attorney, boom, we've got this and this and this. When can we expect that, do you think?
My hope is that people are feeling that now. My hope is that the difference between the middle of last year and the first few months of this year, that they feel different, right? At this moment, I can tell you that, you know, 12th and Jackson feels different. I was there just the other day, and it is not the same open air market that it was last year. 3rd Avenue feels different. I was there last week, and you know, there are more people returning, there are more people walking around. I'm seeing more food establishments reopening as people are returning to the core. They're not as fast as I want them to open, right? But they're coming, and I see it. And there is that positive energy and positive engagement. We are utilizing our Office of Economic Development, our Department of Neighborhoods, our city resources to help activate spaces, to help business owners, and to also bring back an environment that people want to be in, that people will flock to. And it does take a moment to get there, but my hope, quite candidly, is that people already feel it now and that it will only get better.
Want to come back to one aspect of the backlog. It's related to the backlog, and it's related to these sort of more chronic problems. And DSA, you know, first identified this issue several years ago with some really important research they did. This notion of the high utilizer initiative from the city attorney's office. Natalie, can you give up just a brief definition of what that is and what impacts that's having on addressing the backlog, but also eliminating problems in the future?
Sure, absolutely. So the high utilizer initiative is obviously an initiative that the Seattle City Attorney's Office launched, but the idea has been discussed. There have been work groups on it. We've tried to tackle at the county level, the city level, the state level, but essentially the criteria as been announced from the Seattle City Attorney's Office is essentially that, you know, these individuals have 12 or more referrals to the Seattle Attorney's Office within the past 5 years, and at least one case referral in the past 8 months. The average individual that meets this criteria has more than 20 cases referred over that 5-year period, and the large majority have cases within this year. Why this initiative is important is because, as has already been identified in this call, it takes collaboration. Jail is not a resource that we can use to deal with this population. We need to have a collaboration of efforts, and that includes social services. It includes working with our community providers. It includes looking at individuals who are suffering from significant mental health concerns. A lot of the individuals that are referred to us at the city level have competency concerns, and they have been through the system many, many times. And, you know, jail is one of those tools that we do have to use for some of the population. We have 12 of these individuals, or approximately 12 of these individuals in custody now, but there has to be a plan beyond that. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to launch this initiative, to start talking to all of our criminal justice partners about what do we do with this population of people. We cannot just look at one case at a time. We have to look at the entire individual and what we have done, what hasn't worked, and what new things can we try. But we're recognizing, and the data does show that, is that these individuals, you know, are causing the great majority of the referrals that are coming to the Seattle City Attorney's Office. There's a lot of crossover with our partners across the street at King County. And so that's why it's important to look at this criteria and figure out the individuals that meet that and come up with a plan.
And in general, it seems like during the pandemic, there was this new sense of cooperation just from a sense of pragmatism because of, you know, having to meet via Zoom, or, you know, having maybe nothing else to do. But this idea we could just solve problems because they needed to be solved because they were a health issue affecting everybody, technically or theoretically. And it seems like that spirit has contributed to the level of collaboration and cooperation that we're seeing now in addressing these issues that predate the pandemic, but that were certainly worsened by the pandemic. Along with that, though, I think the public has reached a point where they're more fed up than ever. The patients with, cleverly named solutions or cleverly named programs that may not address the deep root causes of things. And there's just it's a tipping point's been reached with people's attitudes about what they're willing to tolerate or what they're willing to see the law enforcement do and the criminal justice system do to address these problems, to make it safer to return to work, to make it safer to use public transit, safer to go to Belltown, 3rd Avenue, 12th and Jackson. It's just, there's this sense, I feel this kind of collective sense of like, we're ready for new solutions. I'd like to hear from all of you on this. Is law enforcement, is law enforcement prepared to do what's going to be required out on the streets to feed into the programs that you guys have in place and the approaches and new attitudes and new cooperation? Do we have all the tools to do that with the people on the front lines?
I'll start in addressing, do we have enough law enforcement, which I think was a component of your question, and the answer is no. We need many more officers. We have seen a lot of people leave the profession in general. We've reached out to partner law enforcement agencies, the Port of Seattle, King County Sheriffs. Everybody's down. The Port of Seattle is down 21% in terms of officers. And so the last few years, we have seen a number of people retiring and a number of people leaving the profession. We have to re-engage people in what good work it is and what good work it can be. We have to talk about that actively and openly. There are very good starting salaries for people who may be finishing college and trying to figure out what their career move is. People who want to help, people who want to be a part of the solution. The conversation around law enforcement has changed, and we have to recruit for the folks who want to be out there. And I think that it's a noble profession. And we have to re-engage in that. I think what we're seeing, not just from the pandemic, is that the spirit of cooperation isn't born out of a boredom that we didn't get to see each other, is born out of necessity, because what we've seen is that the divisiveness has taken all of the resources we've had and we've had to spread them out we've had the peanut butter approach to absolutely everything. And the peanut butter approach doesn't work. So working together, assessing our resources, and then saying, how do we enhance what we're doing by not duplicating certain efforts, making sure that we are working collaboratively so that we know we don't have the resources we need. And if we work against each other, those resources will have to go so much further. We need mental health supports. There is a new emergency mental health facility that is just broken ground up at Northwest Hospital, up around the Aurora area. When that opens, I think there's going to be at least 150 beds for emergency mental health support. We need them. We need more. all of our challenges, we've ignored what we have needed in terms of mental health, public health, and resources. And so working on just the policing and the arrest and all of those sorts of things, that is a Band-Aid at the lower end. And we have to walk and chew gum. We have to still work on the things that will put mental health support services in place, and make sure that we are building for the future, because otherwise it won't be sustainable for the long haul.
You know, one thing that struck me during the pandemic was and maybe I'm sure they existed beforehand, but this notion of dashboards, right? For these all these different complex measures of hospitalization rates and positivity rates and, vaccination rates, all that stuff. With all the complexity that feeds into what we're talking about today, is there one place where you can see like, okay, this is what's happening with homelessness. This is what's happening with criminal justice. This is what's happening with law enforcement. This is what's happening with community organizations who are, having privately funded initiatives to address homelessness or drug abuse or mental health. Is there one place where you can go and sort of be like, here's the status report on this very complex issue, which all boils down to, am I safe getting off the bus and walking to my job or walking home from work?
So law enforcement, our Seattle Police Department, they've been keeping that data for years and years and years, and that is publicly available on their website. And what I was talking about, which the mayor will debut for everybody next month, will be one that specifically focuses in and around homeless encampments. And it will talk about how we prioritize the encampments that need attention. And one of the elements that goes into how they are prioritized is whether or not there are public safety incidents happening at those encampments. So if there is a shooting, if there is an assault, all of those things, all of those criteria help to focus where and how encampments are in our priority list. So I don't want to steal too much of the mayor's thunder, but the team is doing some great work on that, and that's not just something that we'll be looking at internally, but it will also be public facing elements of that, so the public can see it as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that's one aspect of it. But what I'm talking about is this more, because we're covering a lot of ground in this conversation this morning. There's so many questions coming in the chat box that I can't even keep up with them. There's very specific questions about certain parts of downtown, or about safety on public transportation, or what we should tell employees as we're trying to encourage them to come back to work. And it all really boils down to that whether someone feels safe when they live here or work here, or if they're planning to visit here, or if someone's trying to book a big convention here, can they look and see what's going on in terms of public safety in and around downtown Seattle. And given that it is so complex, I mean, and all these elements feed into it, whether it's housing and mental health and all that stuff I've mentioned a moment ago. I would love to find some way to be able to gather that all into one single place to kind of know like where we were, because with an amorphous timeline where we can't really tell how quickly these things can really be addressed because there are such complex issues, it does start to feel like a little bit of a chicken and egg kind of thing, or a circular discussion or a circular conversation about, we're doing these things and this will have this effect, but it all sort of, it's hard to weave it all together as something that just an average consumer or average person trying to understand what's going on beyond how they just feel can tap into. I know one aspect of cooperation, especially during the pandemic, but continuing on, is this notion of transparency. And I think there's particular things that City Attorney's Office is doing, and also the Prosecuting Attorney's Office are doing around transparency with other agencies or with the public. Natalie or Leesa, do you want to talk about what you guys are doing in terms of transparency for what you're doing and whether it's working or not, and what comes next?
Well, I'll start. I mean, I do think transparency is important. And I think, we, much like the Seattle Police Department, we have a public facing dashboard that shares the number of cases and the number of referrals and time to disposition and all kinds of things that give kind of a snapshot of what the criminal justice system looks like from a felony standpoint. We're also, as I mentioned earlier in this call, we are doing a better job of sharing our information, not just with our criminal justice and law enforcement stakeholders, but also with the business community and with our treatment providing community, so that we're all kind of seeing the same things and can collaborate together on those. I also think that an area where we could offer some increased transparency is just really being very clear about what the size of the need is. I think that there is a great call from all over King County for increased services, because we know how effective that is and why it's so important to offer services to get to the root cause of some of the behavior that we're trying to stop. And when we're not honest about what the need is, it can be really hard to scale the resources to fill that need. Similarly, I think that it's not just law enforcement that are leaving the profession. We've had a number of senior deputy prosecutors leave our office, and it has been difficult to get talent back into the door. And being more transparent about that and changing how we recruit and changing, where we seek talent has been helpful. But we could do a better job of being more clear about that, I guess. And then in another area where I think we probably could do a better job of being transparent and taking a closer look is at our Involuntary Treatment Act court. That's an area where caseload has grown significantly over the years. And that is an important safety net that it used to be when people presented as mentally ill, harm to self, others, or gravely disabled, we were able to get those folks into services. That system is under great strain. And as a result, that safety net is not as effective as it could be. So that's another area where when I think about increased transparency, particularly as it relates to need, that's something that we could all maybe ask for and work for together.
Natalie?
With the Seattle City Attorney's Office, with new leadership, one of Anne's primary goals is to make sure that we have, just to follow the same model as King County, a very visible dashboard, or at least data and transparency about the cases that we are receiving, the close in time filing, our rates of filing, our decline rates, but also outcomes with regard to our specialty courts, outcomes with regard to our diversion programs, and that includes recidivism data that we can look at just in terms of the case, people that may have been referred to programs and what those outcomes are looking like. So the data and transparency is really important to the Seattle City Attorney's Office. We work for the public. We are public servants, and so we want to make sure that our constituents and the community knows the work that we're doing and that it reflects what the community is asking us to do. So data and transparency is something that this office is working to improve. And I think that will help, especially with the new case management system that is coming throughout Seattle Municipal Court and the Seattle City Attorney's Office.
And Senior Deputy Mayor Harrell, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but a big thread for this is, the homeless encampments. And we have a couple questions from the audience about, what's going on with the homeless encampments and addressing those. Where are those people going when the camp has been closed and cleaned up? Anything you can share from the mayor's office about that part of this problem?
Yeah, absolutely. So before each encampment, we have social workers and teams that go to each encampment at least a couple days, usually a couple weeks before an encampment is on our list for removal. We work a little bit quicker if there is a public safety incident that has occurred at that encampment, such as a shooting or something else along those lines. But in the time period leading up, we offer referrals and to the transitional housing and shelters. And usually we'll do at least 3 trips through to offer support before removal takes place. And so, that's just one of the things. We do have a lot of people taking us up on the referrals, to be candid, and we are trying to do our best to make sure that the minute we have an opening within the system, that we've got somebody ready to fill it. So if we've got an opening in a transitional housing establishment that we are getting referrals out to people to fill those openings. Not everybody that we offer a referral to is ready to accept it at that time. And that's why we go back multiple times, because it may not be that in that location and that point and where they are, that they are ready to accept it. But that doesn't mean we stop offering it. And then so we have to really just continue that outreach work. And it might be, do you have support services you need to be able to accept those referrals? And so it might be mental health referrals as opposed to just a housing referral, or a substance support referral as opposed to just a housing referral. And then from there, you know, we go through our process. But the important thing is that we can't just say status quo is acceptable, that it's fine for you to just stay where you are. We know that some encampments, people will complain that some encampments have been there for many years, and quite candidly, that's a societal failure. Nobody should be allowed to just sleep on the street for many years. It means that there's probably some form of depression or something that is keeping them rooted in this continual cycle that they're not willing to or able to break out of. And that's where we have to push and we have to help, right? It is not up to us to turn a blind eye. It is up to us to provide supports and services for everybody. And sometimes that means a nudge, and that nudge has to come with services at all times, but it also cannot be, will allow you to just to stay in one spot and die in this location. So I know that's it's not the easiest thing to do, and it is challenging, but we have to make these tough decisions for the health of the entire city.
And I mean, in the spirit of that, in terms of cooperation, I mean, are there agencies that should be cooperating more? Are you getting, is everybody working together as harmoniously as it seems City Attorney's Office and the King County Prosecutor's Office is working together? Are there agencies or organizations that are standing in the way that you wish you could convince to get on board with this? Let's talk. It's only the four of us here. No one can hear us.
Nobody else.
Tell me candidly, who or what is standing in the way? Is it money? Is it organizations? Why can't we just do this now? Everything we need to do right now and have it start turning results tomorrow.
So we have a new regional homelessness authority, and we have great hopes and aspirations for what they can do as a new agency within the system. They they're an integral part of the fabric for what we need to do. They have to get their counselors out in the street. They have to get the more transitional housing open for folks. They have to get their social workers out, offering people support, offering them services. That was what they were built for. And so we're anxious to continue the work with them to not only just start to build their system, but to start seeing the results of that work, where they're actually getting more people to support services they need. It was part of the overall regional plan for coordination. And though they just started in January, we have high hopes and aspirations for what they can do, and we need them to do it. I would say, we need to build more of a public safety net, and that is working in partnership with the state and getting them to allocate the resources that they need to allocate. Our mental health challenges have only grown in the last couple of years. Even amongst people who have the safety and security of shelter, our mental health challenges have only grown. And so we really need to be able to address that for the city, and especially for our young people who've had a lot of key developmental years taken from them and are going to have to learn some socialization a little bit later in life than they would have if we'd had 2 years of what we think is kind of our normal business.
It's the 60th anniversary of the Seattle World's Fair, and we were talking last night at an event about that unprecedented level of cooperation between businesses, Washington State, City of Seattle, King County, federal government, with dollars and support and all kinds of resources to pull off pretty exciting 6-month-long carnival that also had created this amazing civic infrastructure at Seattle Center. That was the cooperation was just, again, unprecedented, blew everyone's mind how much they accomplished with that World's Fair project, which was something fun, right? Stuff we're talking about today isn't fun. I mean, it's the worst of the worst in a lot of ways, the parts of humanity and the parts of living in a city that nobody wants to come face to face with. How do we need leadership like we had for the World's Fair? Do we need a broad goal that everyone can understand? Do we need something that is, maybe exciting is not the word, but something that really fires people's imaginations about addressing a problem that only Seattle can do? I mean, Seattle's a special place, has always been innovative, always been able to pull off unbelievable feats of accomplishment. Can we do the same with public safety? And who's going to step up and be is that Mayor Harrell's job to be the leader of that, the charismatic leader who pulls it all together? Is this some other unidentified person? Who do we look to for that reassurance? Not just talking points, but reassurance and actual progress you can point to say, okay, here's what's different. Here's how it's better than yesterday. Here's how tomorrow's going to be better than today. I don't quite see how that all comes together. I mean, who wants to respond to that? It's a big question. Anyway.
So you hit on one thing. Mayor Harrell has spoken about what he calls space needle thinking, right? That well, somebody came up with this idea to put a restaurant in the sky and build a space needle, and that it took space needle thinking to create the World's Fair and all of the things that came from it over the course of shaping Seattle as a persona, as a city persona. We need more space needle thinking. It's not going to come just from one person. It is going to come from the fabric. I think that we have leaders. The mayor in particular is one of our leaders, but we have many leaders who have the ability to do that level of space needle thinking. And it also means, though, that we have to do some things where we will not allow failure to keep us from pursuing positive and good things to do, right? We cannot allow great to be the enemy or good to be the enemy. We have to really be willing to try some new things, and we have to be willing to take our best, most educated plans and say it's worth the risk to get the potential that we can get from this. And I think that's part of what we have to be willing to do. People have been too afraid to fail, so they've been too afraid to do anything. We have to be willing to accept a little bit of failure and make adjustments if we actually want to be the city that we endeavored to be 60 years ago.
All right, we are just about out of time. I want to apologize for the questions we couldn't get to. Seems like the key for everything is more specificity, the better, about particular neighborhoods and parts of downtown. If you can find some way to present information, have people get information specifically about their areas, that would be a huge help. I want to thank our panelists, Monisha Harrell, who's the Senior Deputy Mayor, Leesa Manion from the King County Prosecutor's Office, and Natalie Walton-Anderson from the City Attorney's Office. I want to thank everyone for joining us for DSA Virtual Access. And thanks for DSA staff, John Scholes, Sally Wright, James Cito, Emily Baylor. And please put on your calendar our next DSA Virtual Access event. It's on Thursday, May 19th, and the focus will be chronic homelessness. Until then, I'm Feliks Banel for Downtown Seattle Association, and we'll see you in downtown Seattle.